All right, so with that out of the way, welcome everyone back to another episode of Herbal Prepper Live. Our show airs live every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific. Today is Sunday, September 3rd, 2017. Welcome everyone who's tuning in live this evening. Hello to everyone in the chat room and to all those folks who are going to be listening to this on the download later on. I just want to apologize starting out that there was not a live show last week. Had a number of personal emergencies that all landed Sunday morning last week that there was no avoiding. People needed to get medical treatment and such. So that was dealt with, and it's been kind of spilling out over into the remainder of the week here. So I do apologize for not sending out a newsletter about that either. Anyway, for those who are listening live, if you have something that you want to share, if you have a nagging question, please join us in the chat room on prepperbroadcasting.com. You can type your question in there, or you can take advantage of this being a live broadcast and call into the show. The phone number to do so is 347-202-0228. Again, that number is 347-202-0228. And remember that you need to press 1 so that we know that you are waiting on the line for us to answer. All right, so before we get started, I have a little bit of business to get out of the way. If you are listening over at Blog Talk, join us here on prepperbroadcasting.com. Join the chat room here, and while you're here, please check out all of the other hosts. Check out all of their shows, all of their archived episodes. There's tons of information here, and you are shortchanging yourself if you don't check it out. So for those who might be listening for the first time, I just want to make you aware that I have 2 books available that you need to have in your prepper library. Prepper's Natural Medicine is like a crash course in herbalism. It would be great even if you're not into, preparedness, but it is written with the prepper in mind. It covers core herbal skills, therapeutic properties of 50 different herbs. There's herbal formulas to get you started. They deal with both acute and chronic conditions. It walks you through making a first aid kit, an herbal first aid kit, that is. Does it cover everything found in an herbal certification course? No, but it is, I think, the next best thing. So my second book, Prepping for a Pandemic, is loaded with critical information that you need to have. Prepping for a Pandemic it's an unusual book out there. I don't think there's one like it. It looks at the very hard and difficult lessons that can be learned from the Ebola outbreak of 2014 and shows you how you can apply this knowledge to protect you and your family from future deadly epidemics and pandemics that might hit your area. I also give my top 7 picks for what that next great pandemic might happen to be. And we look at both herbal and conventional options where such options exist, and unfortunately, they don't always. But I do show you what you can do, as well as how to do a self-imposed reverse quarantine and tons of other stuff. So if you're really serious about being ready and being prepared, then you really need to get both of these books. And they can be found in the Prepper Broadcasting Bookshop, and they can also be found, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, wherever books are sold. If you are still lucky enough to have a local bookstore, they can always use your support, and they can always order either of my books if they don't have them. So let's see. Last thing I want to mention, there's going to be a little change happening in some of the classes on herbalprepper.com. I'm making my life easier this year, the school year starting. So this year I'm determined to make my life simpler and easier and less laborious. So I'm going to be changing up how registration happens for my courses. And instead of there being sessions where people start and must finish by a certain date, there's going to be an open enrollment kind of thing going on. I'll have more information on that for you next week. But I just want to throw that out there. There's, even though I may not have gotten to attend to all of my social networking and newsletter writing and such this week, there has been work going on behind the scenes when it comes to that. So I will let you know more about that next week. Let's see here. Something I want to point out about the courses. There's one course already that is open enrollment. I just need it. I thought to give access to the course manually, but you can take the course at your own speed, and that is the Herbal Burn Care course. And given tonight's topic, I want to put a little focus on that. It is still in its original form. I have not put the updated version up on the site yet, but anyone who has taken the course in the past will have access to the updated version when that does occur. But until it is, it's at a discounted rate. So one of the things that we deal with when it comes to radiation and exposure to radiation are burns, and that's something that I think the Herbal Burn Care course would greatly benefit you if you're serious about being prepared for this type of an emergency. All right, so that you can find on herbalprepper.com. And let's go ahead. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to get into what you can do as a backup plan in case of, unfortunately, some type of a nuclear event. All right, so we will be right back. All right, so we are back. Just as a reminder, if you have questions, you can call into the show. The number is 347-202-0228. Press 1 so that we know that you are waiting to come onto the line, or you can pop a question into the chat room and I will see it there. So, the whole topic here, of what do you do if there's some type of nuclear event, some type of fallout? What if there's a dirty bomb? What if, what if this happens? Why on earth would anybody be looking to be prepared with herbal or natural remedies? So the question is, why on earth do you need a backup plan in the first place? I mean, why wouldn't just all the survivors either go to a hospital or be brought to the closest local hospital? And unfortunately, a very difficult truth is that U.S. cities are not medically prepared for a nuclear detonation. So, I mean, let's say this happens, granted, you have there's the worst of the worst case scenarios, another state, another country sends a bomb over here, and, we have this big explosion, and it does incredible damage. And obviously your medical facilities, along with everything else in that location, would be flattened. But what about those hospitals that are on the edge of those? So that's the worst case scenario. And the other scenarios, they get a little less, devastating, but they're still devastating. But those hospitals that are just on the outskirts of wherever a blast might happen, or wherever an accident could happen, or wherever there may be, let's say, I'll get into the various scenarios that could happen. Those hospitals that are on the outskirts of that would still be functioning. I found an article. I'm going to put the link here. And I'm going to tomorrow spend a little time. I know it's a holiday tomorrow, but I'm going to be spending a little time putting up a post on my site with all of these links. So for everyone who is listening, you can go to herbalprepper.com. Give me until late afternoon to get this up. And I'm going to have all the links that I'm posting in the chat room here tonight. So I just posted a link there, and it's an article. It's called U.S. Cities Are Not Medically Prepared for a Nuclear Detonation by Jerome M. Hauer. And if you're wondering who that is, the bio at the end of the article reads, Jerome M. Hauer has served in cabinet positions at the local and state level and was an acting assistant secretary for the Office of Public Health Emergency Preparedness at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Hauer is an associate editor of the Journal of Special Operations Medicine and president of the Homeland Security section of the Health Physics Society. He earned his doctorate at Cranfield University and a master's degree from the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and holds a bachelor's degree from New York University. He is also an adjunct associate professor at Georgetown University, visiting professor at the Cranfield University. So this is somebody who knows his stuff. And he wrote an article, the title, U.S. Cities Are Not Medically Prepared for a Nuclear Detonation. This is why you need to have a backup. So from the article, he's identified this primary problem is, why are we not ready? And it's because ever since the end of the Cold War, we've just been complacent. That's the bottom line. Cold War ended. Yeah, I guess, that was it. We've become complacent. We no longer need to have, we no longer need to be ready as a nation for the potential of a nuclear strike or a nuclear accident. I mean, Fukushima should have taught us that. You have to be, accidents happen. Doesn't just have to be an attack by another nation. And now, of course, we have, potential terrorist attacks and such that we need to be concerned about. So he identifies that while an attack is still unlikely, there are a few scenarios that we should be aware could happen: an attack at a nuclear facility or an accident at a nuclear facility. An attack by another nation, which in that case, that would be the worst case scenario, because they've got the biggest bombs, so that they've got the largest devices. And that would be that would be the worst case scenario. An improvised weapon used in a terrorist attack, or a terrorist attack using a dirty bomb, which is probably the most likely scenario. Why is that the most likely scenario? Well, there's a lot of reasons why other nations don't want to necessarily get into a nuclear war. That's not really a winnable situation. Nobody really wants that. Of course, then you have to take a look at nations that their leaders don't seem to have a respect for human life, and how do they treat their people and such. North Korea comes to mind, we have a number of countries like Pakistan and Iran. Anybody who thinks that they're not going to translate their nuclear program into, for nuclear power into a nuclear weapons program is fooling themselves. And this is not a nation that we want to have get that kind of capability. But anyway, while all these things are possible, a dirty bomb is much easier. Especially for a terrorist to put together. The dirty bomb is a conventional explosive that has been laced with radioactive material. And where would they get it? Well, they'd steal it. I have another link here from some that was just stolen this past April. Let me grab that link here. Again, I'll post all the links to my site tomorrow. There we go. And what we had here was there was a truck that was carrying X-ray equipment, and this had some radioactive components to this. So it was stolen, and unfortunately, this can be used to make a dirty bomb. Also, the article here by Jerome Hoyer also agrees with something that Chuck Hudson had said when he was a guest here on Herbal Prepper Live, talking about, nuclear events and dirty bombs and so on. That was his area of specialty there when he was in the Army. And he said they'd steal it. Let me read you what was in the article here. Gaining access to radioactive isotopes is not as challenging as one might expect. Medical facilities use various types for diagnostic testing, and several industries require them. Certain isotopes, while difficult to come by, have a long half-life, and if used in a dirty bomb, would contaminate the blast area and that around it with residual radioactive material for months or years. This would create a hot zone too dangerous to enter for any type of firefighting, rescue, or reconstruction activity. Additionally, radioactive particles dispersed in the air can be carried downwind in a plume and deposited far from the explosion. And that's exactly what Chuck said as well, that, it's not that difficult, if you're in a medical facility, to gain access to various parts of that medical facility and be able to get these radioactive isotopes. So, and we know that it's happened. So it's probably not going to be the last time that, this material is stolen. It wasn't the first time either. There was another incident back in 2013 where some radioactive material had been stolen as well. But the individuals involved, the suspects, actually ended up showing up to the hospital because of the sickness that they got from being in proximity to it. So, but the one from April here that I linked to, I don't believe that they found either the material or those involved. I might be wrong, but I looked for it and I didn't see where they'd ever solved that. All right, so what can we do? Because here's the situation. You can go read that article about why we're not ready, but if you think about it, communication's probably going to go down. You've got to get medical personnel to the hospital if they're not there already. So people are, going to need to come in who are not on duty, need to get there. There may be some confusion with that. They're going to be overwhelmed. Who knows what is still, what they're going to be faced with. It's going to be, they're not prepared, and they're going to be facing an overwhelming number of people trying to get care. So that's not a good situation. So what can we do in order to be prepared in case of a nuclear event? It's a difficult question to ask because a lot depends upon the type of the event, the size of the blast, the height of the blast, how close the person was to the blast, and so on and so forth. How long were they exposed to any fallout? Fallout is, when we talk about it going through the air and that plume and so on, and it falls to the earth and people are exposed. So, there's a lot of factors involved, but there are some common injuries that we should be aware of, and we need to be aware of what we are capable of handling ourselves and what we're not capable of handling ourselves. We need to have a plan to deal with this. So one of the first things that is common is something called acute radiation syndrome, and this might be the only injury that a person has, and it may not show up right away. It might take weeks for this to show up. Someone might only have some mild nausea, but in a more serious presentation, so it could prevent bone marrow from producing white cells. White cells are those that fight infection. It could also prevent the production of platelets, which we need to form blood clots. It could also destroy the lining of the gastrointestinal system. So what does that mean? That means not just a little bit of nausea. That means vomiting. It means diarrhea. It means that you can't swallow food. You can't digest food. So food has to be given intravenously in that case. So what could you do? If it's mild, and if it's not something where, you or the person that you're with is like falling over from that, where they absolutely must get immediate medical attention, there are some things that you can do. You could ingest bentonite clay. They sell that in a I would strongly suggest you get the pre-mixed stuff. If you have to mix it up on your own, it's a mess, and it'll be clumpy, and it's a little nasty anyway, but they have a pre-mix. I got some on Amazon. It's not that uncommon, but some people will drink it as a detox. But what this will do is it will help. It's coming in contact with, the esophagus, going into the stomach, going through the intestines and so on. And it's going to, through the process of adsorption, which is like a magnet, and it draws what's toxic to us, which has a positive ion charge and it has a negative ion charge, and it draws it to it, and it adheres to it, and then you can eliminate that. So bentonite clay would be helpful in that case, but you also need to heal the lining of the gastrointestinal system. So, this is where, I couldn't find any studies to back this up, or I don't think there are anyone who's used this as an approach. And if it, in a hospital setting, I'd be very shocked that anyone would. And I don't know that it's been documented anywhere I looked, but my theory would be You'd want to use some Demulcent herbs. Those are these mucilaginous, slippery, these herbs that produce this sort of a sliminess when they are exposed to water. And what Demulcent herbs do is they help to heal that mucosal lining, that they help to heal those very delicate tissues. So the lining of your the whole gastrointestinal system, you would want. So some of these would be like slippery elm or marshmallow root, and I would probably do like a cold infusion of those and try to have someone sip that, assuming, of course, that they are not just vomiting everything up. If they are, then you need to get to the hospital. And I should also state here that I'm not suggesting that anybody avoid the hospital or stay away from it. I'm suggesting that if it's difficult to get to the hospital, or if you know that the hospital has reached surge capacity and they can barely deal with what they're dealing with, and you're not somebody who's in real dire straits, then you might be able to hold off, until you might want to have, some of these things on hand to tide you over until the hospital can actually see you. So let's put that in perspective. I'm not suggesting you don't go. I'm suggesting that you have a backup plan in case medical care is not available. There's nothing available. There's no way that you can access medical care in that kind of a situation. So that would be something I would consider for the gastrointestinal system and the lining of it. There's also the issue of trying to just detox the body in general. So I have another link here. I wanted to make this as evidence, this particular episode as evidence-based as I could. Let me see. Come on here. Copy that link. All right. So this goes to a study on chlorella, and it's an evaluation of chlorella as a decorporation agent to enhance the elimination of radioactive strontium from the body. Chlorella is another one of those substances that works through adsorption, and but it's also highly nutritive as well. So an antioxidant. There's a lot of information on chlorella if you go to pubmed.gov and just start looking at all the various things that it can do. Oh, I copied and pasted the link, but I didn't hit enter. So there, it's in the chat room now. So I would imagine, Jay Fergie, that in most hospitals will eventually lock down. I don't even know how they'd process if you have insurance or not. I just don't even know how they're going to handle it. There's just going to be, in this this is a very serious situation. And there's just going to be so many casualties and so many people, stumbling in, I don't know. If I was mildly nauseous, I'd probably try to drive further away from it. And this is just me speaking. I'd probably try to drive further away and get to a different hospital that's further away from where the explosion was, because they're going to be less busy. I probably wouldn't go to one that was immediately close to me unless I had no other choice, because I know they're going to be bombarded with other people that need care, and they may or may not get to me. So another one I want to put up here, spirulina. This is chlorella and spirulina are both these like blue-green algae. And let me put this one in the chat room here. All right. And this study was spirulina provides protection to the body from radiation from cancer treatments. It was a completely unrelated thing to a nuclear event, but this was about someone. It was a case study of a woman who went for cancer treatments. It's not evidence itself that spirulina will always do this, but I thought it was such an interesting case that I wanted to mention it. And if you also look up spirulina and cancer, it's this kind of result is duplicated, multiple times. If you look on PubMed.gov, there's tons of studies like that. So if spirulina provides some protection to the body from radiation treatments, this may be an option for you in a nuclear situation, the type of scenarios that we're looking at. Now, there are other types of damage that can happen as well, especially to the central nervous system. Now, spirulina, again, was used, let me copy this, in survivors, let me type this. I don't know if I'm getting the spelling right here. I'm a terrible speller, and if anyone who follows me on Facebook or whatnot will see that I constantly have to go back and edit everything. So spirulina at Chernobyl there. This was used, now let me just say this, spirulina in this study, this was used with survivors from Chernobyl, and it was one of several supplements that were given to people who were having problems due to injuries to the central nervous system from exposure to radiation from radioactive fallout from Chernobyl, excuse me. So they were given spirulina and like 6 other things, but I looked up each one. You can go to that study and you can find each one that they used, and they're available. So it's not like it was spirulina with some pharmaceuticals that you can't get your hands on without a prescription. These were all various supplements for brain function and such. So things that, the central nervous system is going to control. I found another one for spirulina and just cancer in general. So let me copy that and put this here. So my point here is for trying to prevent damage to your DNA and trying to cleanse your body from that, and loading your body up with nutrition to help heal the cells. You've got spirulina and chlorella. I'd also add nettle into that too, because nettle is extremely nutritious. But that study there shows another, that page that I just posted, it's spirulina and cancer. It's not a single study there. It's a page that has loads of studies with spirulina and cancer as the search terms. So you can see just in general, the beneficial effects that spirulina has, when it comes to radiation and cancer. So you have to look up the individual studies on that page on its own. Other things that you could do to prevent damage would be to consume a lot of antioxidants. So a lot of vitamin C, a lot of vitamin E. So lots of colorful vegetables, lots of greens and organic veggies. Supplement if you need to, but I mean, try to focus on that, because a lot of the illnesses, like for instance, leukemia, may not be something that you necessarily see for 2 years. So within that time, the time of the incident and the time where you may get a diagnosis, you might have a year or 2 years go by. You can certainly do something in those couple of years. Skin cancer and lung cancer are also another 2 things to be aware of. And that's like a decade or more, 2 decades before you start to see those kinds of illnesses come up as a result of exposure to radiation from this type of an event. This type, there's several different types. We just don't, I'm referring to that in sort of a general way because we don't know what type exactly it might be. I also found there was a test that was done on guinea pigs that showed that after they were exposed to radiation, they lived longer by eating broccoli and cabbage. So I would add that into that mix there too. Let me see here. I think this link is for that. Let me see. I just want to make sure before I post this real quick. I want to make sure that this is the link.
Take your prepping plans and survival skills to the next level. Go to survivalsullivan.com to find a treasure of no-fluff prepping information on wilderness and urban survival, stockpiling, and much more. Everything you need to protect yourself and your loved ones. Go to survivalsullivan.com now.
Can you hear me now? Is it any better? Okay, great, wonderful. So let me go back to what I was saying there. Now that I'm not all garbled, I certainly don't want to sound like I'm underwater talking to you. So, miso soup has a very long history with helping people to heal and stay healthy after exposure to radiation. This is even true of survivors from around Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So for people who don't know what miso is, it's made usually from a soybean paste. And soy is not great for everybody. Sometimes there's gluten in it as well. So I found a link that's got a few options for people. If you can't have soy, which is the traditional way of making the soup, I found a link that's got some information on both gluten-free and soy-free alternatives to make miso soup. Basically, there's a fermentation that happens here, and I have to tell you, I mean, I have a gluten sensitivity. I have a soy sensitivity. This is something that, I don't know 100% if the gluten-free or soy-free alternatives are as effective as the traditional soy miso is. And even with my sensitivities, I'm stocking the original soy-based paste. So the issues I have, I'm sensitive to gluten, but I don't have celiac. I have a different type of a problem with it. If you have celiac and you truly can't have it, there are some that are soy-based that have other grains in it other than gluten-containing grains. You can find some that are made with rice and so on. Finding gluten-free miso is nowhere near as difficult as finding soy-free miso. So let me put that out there. Something else. This is actually a link to an article on my site because I had posted this a while back. It's actually got links to 2 videos done by Arthur Hain. They're on YouTube. I think it's in the produce section. If it's either in the produce section or if you have some grocery stores will have just an aisle that just says ethnic foods, this sort of catch-all thing. And sometimes you might find it there. Hi, Highlander. Thanks for joining us. I just saw you sneak in there. But the link that I posted to my site, I have 2 videos embedded from Arthur Hain's YouTube channel. And this is all about pine pollen and using this, making a tincture out of it, and why it's protective against radioactive particles. That would be one of the things I would really, really want to have on hand. And you really don't see this sold anywhere, so you're going to have to collect your own pine pollen for that one. If you do find a source of that, let me know. I know that that's something that I think that I'm very glad that we have a lot of pine trees up at our place in Maine. So the next one here, this is a book. You might find this one on Amazon or such, but this is by herbalist Paul Bergner. And when it comes to evidence-based herbalism, I mean, a man knows his stuff. There's no getting around that. And the book is called The Healing Power of Ginseng. And in this book, he refers to ginseng as this is one of the primary herbs, or maybe the most important herb that he would use for detoxification of the body. So, and he specifically cited detoxification here for ginseng. So that would be something to check out as well. And it's American ginseng. It's not Chinese ginseng. So some of the other things, now nausea and so on. If you're looking for relief from nausea, of course you've got the perennial favorites of ginger root or peppermint or something like that, just to handle some of the nausea. Have someone chew on a bit of candied ginger if it's just the nausea. The concern, though, if somebody has diarrhea and they're vomiting, is dehydration. And if they can't eat or drink, this is going to be a big problem, because now they can't even just sip on water if their gastrointestinal lining is so damaged. So that would be something where you do need to bring them to a hospital, because they're going to need IV fluids to at least keep them hydrated. Unless you somehow, have those skills at home and you have, saline and you have the ability to start an IV, unless you have that level of training, then you do need to transport to a medical facility very quickly. Something else that's very common with exposure to radiation are burns. And burns, we're talking, it can vary. It's going to vary again, depending on, the exposure. How long were you exposed? What was the strength of it? There are factors involved here, and I can't give you a quick and easy way to say, okay, if you're so many miles away from this when it happens, you're fine or not. It's not like that, because you need to know how big of an event this was, and how long a person was in that area. And in the middle of all of this chaos, you're probably not going to know this information, not right off the bat. So I wouldn't bother trying to calculate that. Just get away. If you're at the site, there's nothing there's nothing you can do. But if you're outside that blast zone, you just get away from it as fast as you can to or if you have a shelter that you can shelter in place, then get to it as soon as possible so that you can minimize any potential exposure. Especially when it comes to like something like a dirty bomb, you can deal a lot with that, with a lot of the particles, just by showering, removing the clothing and showering, and you would want to do this regardless of, whether it was a dirty bomb or whether you had, exposure, for some other, from some other source, but you're going to want to get out of those clothes. You're going to want to wash all of the surfaces of your skin, your hair and everything. You may, if you were exposed for some time, you may have some temporary hair loss. So you could get into a shower to decontaminate. Yeah, you're going to want iodine to protect your thyroid. But that's the only thing it's going to protect is the thyroid. And some of the other things here that I've mentioned, like the chlorella, the spirulina, and such, and miso, if you've got, seaweed in that, you're already going to have a lot of iodine in there. But if you know that something's coming, taking the iodine pills, that's the easiest way to get it. So, certainly you want to have that. I also picked up one of those little radiation detection cards you can keep in your wallet. It's minimal stuff, but at least, if an explosion goes off, most people, I don't think, these days are, even though it's a threat, and it's probably the most likely one, you've got, the threat of a dirty bomb, aren't thinking that it might be a dirty bomb, and they kind of just like hang around and, like, what was that? It would still be a very large explosion, but let's say you're on the outskirts of that. I would just assume that anytime something blows up, anytime there's a huge, explosion, I would just assume that that it's a dirty bomb until proven otherwise, and just get away from it. But anyway, burns, they can vary from just your skin reddening to, like I was saying about temporary hair loss. Then if it's a little bit more than that, you can have an itch to it. I don't know if you've ever had really, really, truly bad sunburns. And I know, like, a sunburn, that can't be as bad as, a burn from radiation from a nuclear event. Well, it depends. I mean, maybe you didn't get that much exposure. But I personally have had a sunburn that was so bad that I had a 2nd-degree burn, and I had blisters and everything from it. So, I mean, sunburns are radiation burns. It's from the radiation from the sun. So, yes, you can get 2nd-degree burns from the sun as well. You can end up with, let's say, itching to the skin, kind of like, you ever have like an electronic device that's like up against your leg or something for a period of time and it just starts to itch. You can also start to see some flaking as well, like with a sunburn. Sunburns can itch pretty badly. If you have only a minor exposure to that, and you want to get rid of that itching and that irritation there to take the sting out of the skin, you can soak a towel, like a face cloth or something, in some vinegar and apply that to the burn. And that'll get rid of, some of the itching. It'll reduce it anyway. But that we're talking about very minor burns here. You can also end up with blisters, and they can be weeping blisters. So what do you do for that? I came across a study that was done at University of Rochester's Wilmot Cancer Center. And they did a test on lab mice where they gave the lab mice turmeric prior to exposure on a regular basis. It wasn't like they gave them one dose and then exposed them. They made this, the mice ingested this regularly with some frequency prior to exposure. And those mice that had that prior turmeric ingestion, they had statistically fewer burns than the lab mice that did not get it. So it's not that you won't ever burn if you eat a lot of turmeric. Yeah, honey is the next one I'm coming up with, Cindy. I've got a number of herbal suggestions for it, but honey is at the top of the list right there. So with turmeric, if you're taking that regularly, this was a test done in mice. So it's not done on humans. So take that for what it's worth, but there's no reason to think that it would not do the same thing. These mice are chosen because it's expected to have a similar result in people. So some of the other things that you can do for burns for your skin, honey if you've got one thing only, that'll be what I would use. And it's going to help to heal the burn in a way that, especially if it's a serious burn and, where you've got the blisters, because now the blisters are weeping, it's not intact. A blister that's intact, that's like a sterile bandage, and eventually that fluid's going to seep back in and be reabsorbed into the body. If it's weeping, then, it's leaking, you've got to treat that. So I would put honey on it, and you could also look at things like calendula and aloe, again, marshmallow root, which is these demulcent herbs. When they're applied to the skin, they're very soothing and very healing to the skin. If it's really wet, you could put a little bit of clay in there to help absorb that. I'd probably go again with bentonite clay. You could add some echinacea and chaparral, or if you don't have chaparral, you could have barberry, you could have Oregon grapefruit, something like that, just to prevent infection. If the blister is broken open and now all the fluids come out. So you could take all of these in powder, and you could apply it as a powder. You could take these powders, you could mix it up in honey and apply all of it to the burn. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about flushing out the herbs. It'll just be absorbed by the body. You can you could use all these herbs and make a salve if you wanted to, but I think my preferred option would be to take the powders and mix it in a honey and make what is called an electuary. But I would, instead of taking an electuary internally, I would apply it externally to it. Just honey straight on it. That's all. I mean, I know that people make a big deal about getting Manuka honey. I really don't think it's a big deal. I mean, Manuka honey, they've done tests on it. So therefore, whenever there's been tests on something, of course, that's promoted above all else. But people have been using honey for burns and wound care for thousands of years. So I'm not worried about that. Coconut oil, well, when it comes to a burn, and this would be another good reason why I would suggest to check out that herbal burn care course. One of the things that you don't want to do when you're dealing with a burn is to put fats on them until you've completely cooled the skin down. You need to you need to prevent that burn from going any further into the tissue. So things like coconut oil or butter or any of the fats that somebody might want to put directly on a burn, you don't want to do until you've cooled it down. So how do you cool it down? When you have a burn, you're going to, rinse that burn with water first, or let's say you can either pour water over it, or you can, like I was saying with the towel and the vinegar, you could certainly do the towel with some water, and you could make it an herbal infusion of various herbs, and then you could put the towel on that, and then put the towel on wherever the burn is, just to cool it down. Once it's cooled down and the heat is no longer progressing any deeper into the tissue, then you can start adding things like lotions and salves and oils and whatnot. Until then, you don't want to do that. I'm running out of time here. I just wanted to mention that lungs are also extremely susceptible to radiation. You can end up with edema and inflammation. And unfortunately, if you end up with pulmonary insufficiency, that's going to require surgery to correct. But miso broth is very protective. So on a long-term basis, looking at lung cancer, not the short-term pulmonary insufficiency, but long-term, miso broth is very protective for the lungs and suppressing lung tumors. So the other thing that I would mention here, there's also fertility problems, cataracts potential for various cancers, but there's also other infectious diseases, because disease follows disaster. So after everything's happened, you still have to think about things like dysentery, TB, cholera, hepatitis, pneumonia, all of those things. I discussed that in prepping for a pandemic, but we are at the end of the show. Please, go by herbalpepper.com. Check out the herbal courses there. When things go down the tubes, it's really too late to learn a new skill. You got to do this now while times are still relatively stable. And if you like what you've heard, please do connect with me by following me on Facebook, Twitter, G+, Pinterest. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out herbalprepper.com. And thank you, everyone, for spending your time with me. I hope you got something out of it. This has been Kat, the Herbal Prepper with Herbal Prepper Live, and we will see you again next week.